Hey YouTube, what is up? I found a video the other day of a guy talking about Zoodiacs and their effect on the meta next format, their strengths and weaknesses, and when it came time to talk about good side cards to use, he didn't mention any. He said him and his friends worked hard to find these cards, so he didn't want to give them up just yet. He wanted to be able to use the cards he had found before, letting everybody else know about them so we could top tournaments and stuff like that. I understand it, you put in the work, so I decided to put in my own work and find every single side card that I think is worth siding against Zoodiacs next format. So I came up with 18 cards. This one is kind of a joke, so I'm just counting 18 cards, but Ragnar Zero is actually pretty good. And the way I came up with these cards is I looked at the OCG deck lists and the decks that won the most, I looked at their side cards and I looked at the cards that were sided the most, and these were the ones that I came up with. So let's get into it. And I'm just adding one card in right here because I can't believe I forgot it, but Different Dimension Ground is absolutely fantastic against both decks that are pretty much prominent in the next meta, which is Zoodiacs and Infernoids. Basically any card that's sent to the graveyard this turn is banished instead, so that's really fucking good. Basically it stops Momorat, because if Momorat goes to banished zone, it can't be brought back with Tigress, so it really does stop the deck completely. And Infernoids get fucked over if all their cards are banished because they need to banish to special summon their monsters, and usually what they do next format is put them all in the graveyard. So if your opponent activates something like Lawn Mowing next door and you flip Different Dimension Ground, you banish a shit ton of their cards. So I just feel like I should have added that in. I can't believe I forgot it before, but onto the other cards. DD Crow is basically used to interrupt their Tigress combo. Tigress targets Momorat in the graveyard, puts it back under itself as a material, then it detaches Momorat to special summon it to keep the loop going. So in order to prevent that, you use DD Crow to target the Momorat that they target with Tigress. At the same time, you basically chain it to it. Their Tigress fizzles, and then from there, their combo is cut short. They can still end with something like a Drancia, but they're pretty much shut down from that point on. They can only make Drancia. Usually they would make Drancia and another rank 4, or maybe Coach Captain Giga Trainer, or whatever it is, and then just draw +3. So this card cuts them short really badly, and it leaves them with only one card they can interrupt you with, as opposed to maybe 7. So the next card is Flying Sea. This card I think is really strong because all they have to do is normal or special summon a monster, and you just drop Flying Sea on them, and then they can't get anything off. If they normal summon Momorat, use Flying Sea, they're screwed. If they special summon Momorat, use Flying Sea, they're screwed. If they special summon Terratop, Flying Sea, they're screwed. Bottom line, this card shuts them down really hard, and it shuts them down for basically a turn and a half, because if you don't attack the Flying Sea on your turn, they have to use their battle phase to get rid of the Flying Sea, which makes them cost themselves life points, and they basically waste an entire battle phase. So they have to get rid of this card, and it's a really good card to just leave on the field for as long as possible. Another good card is Retaliating Sea. Retaliating Sea relies on your opponent activating a spell card that would special summon a monster. Now this is really specific, but Zoodiacs actually have a card like this. It's I think it's Spiritual Triangle. I forget what the translation specifically is, but it's like Zodiac Triangle. It's a spell card, and they activate it and it has to pop a face-up card to special summon a Zoodiac from their deck, and it can pop itself. So they basically activate a continuous spell card, pop it, and then they go on from there. So this card you use in tandem with that, and it just shuts them down. Though if they don't open Spiritual Triangle, Retaliating Sea is a little subpar, but Retaliating Sea does have the ability to search out other sea monsters if it's in the graveyard, so that is pretty good as well. So that's why I think it's almost like a double-edged sword. If they don't draw the right card, it screws you, but if they do draw the card that Retaliating Sea stops, it stops them really hard because you can search out other cards later on. That's why I like it. You can search out Maxi, you can search out Flying Sea. There's a lot of cards that this card basically searches out for, and it stops them as well. So I like it personally. And next up is Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. This card is really good as well. I mean, you could know why it's really good, because their entire deck is basically extra deck. They don't use any monsters in their main deck. They're not like Monarchs, they don't have big boss monsters. Their boss monsters are all Xyz monsters. So you could just use Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, call Drancia, and then their combo falls short because Drancia is the only Zoodiac monster that interrupts you on your turn. So it just allows you to stop their combos. If you don't want him to even go into Tigress, you could call, Tigress with this and just banish it and stop them from going +3. So there's a lot of possibilities. Even if they special summon Terratop, you can, get rid of MX Saber Invoker if you really wanted to. I wouldn't personally, but this basically allows you to interrupt your opponent anytime you want, getting rid of any part of their combo, which is a really strong thing to be able to do. Next up is Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. This card also allows you to interrupt your opponent. It doesn't negate the effects, but it does destroy the monster. This card is basically going to be used on Tigress, similar to DD Crow, but instead of just banishing the monster, this card actually destroys the Tigress. So when they use Tigress targeting a monster in the graveyard to attach to it is Xyz material, you'd basically just pop the Tigress for free because its only effect would be putting Mole Rat under it. So Ghost Ogre I really like. It basically clears their board and leaves them with no recovery, and that is really, really good. So I personally picked up 3 secret rare first editions of this card because I think I'm going to be main decking it at 3, because it's just going to be so useful. Even against Infernoids this card has use because their monsters activate when they're on the field, so you can just Ghost Ogre and pop their cards and deal with a lot less problems. So that's why I like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. I think I like it a little more than Ghost Reaper because it affects other decks in the meta, not just Zoodiacs. And next up is Spells and Traps. You use Book of Eclipse and you stop your opponent's Drancia from popping any of your monsters because you use this first. It sets all their cards on their field, and then you can do, a whole bunch of shit from there. There's a lot of ways to stop your opponent. Book of Eclipse also stops many other decks, which is why I like it. It was pretty strong this format, and I think it's going to be very strong next format just because your opponent's going to bring out a lot of monsters, and Book of Eclipse basically just shuts them all down, and you can get rid of them without having to worry about Drancia popping your monsters or any other Xyz monster affecting you in any other way. Karen Gorgon as well, just, Book of Eclipse, book the whole field, and you have no problems. Obviously, destroy all the monsters before they get a draw, but other than that, this card basically stops any monster effects from going off on your turn, and that's why I really love it. Forbidden Chalice is a card that you can use not only on your turn, but also on your opponents. If they use Drancia to target and pop one of your cards to interrupt your combo, you can use Forbidden Chalice from hand, negating the Drancia on the field, and then they shut down their, interruptions from there. You could also set this if your opponent's going second, and you can use this to interrupt their combos as well. If they want to use the Mole Rat detach effect, you just put Forbidden Chalice on that, and then it just doesn't get that effect, and then they kind of fizzle from there. You just stop their combos from going off. You could even, Forbidden Chalice Invoker, and then it's fucked. So this card really does interrupt your opponent a lot. I picked up 3 ulti versions of this because this is another card that I think is just really, really good. It's not just good in this format against Zoodiacs, it's also good against any other deck that's going to be prominent in this format, even Eidolons. Negating monster effects is just too broken, and this card does it for pretty much no cost. It just boosts the monster's attack, and that really doesn't matter because Zoodiacs inherently have attack of 0 pretty much. Next up is Cosmic Cyclone. I think this card is relevant because you can use it to banish the elemental triangle of the Zoodiacs, you can use it to get rid of Fire Formation Tenki before any of the effects go off, and it banishes the card. Zoodiacs have the ability to, I think, shuffle some of their cards back, so banishing their cards really does help, especially if it stops their combos from going off. Yeah, you have to pay 1,000 life points, but to make sure your opponent can't get a card back later on, I think this is really worth it. This also works against other decks. This is great against Pendulum, so it's another card that's just great in general, but also does affect Zoodiacs, so that's why I like it. I don't like using Twin Twister, especially in the format that's coming up, because Twin Twister is inherently like a -1 from your hand. You have to use the card on the field and, basically set it and then discard a card. This is better if you're going first. Obviously Twin Twister is better going second because they get a lot of back row, but I like this card especially if you're going first because you can interrupt them and stop a lot of their combos. And next up, for just general board wiping, which is something that Zoodiacs is really, really weak to, I like to run Raigeki. They don't run Raigeki in the OCG because it's still banned there, like how we have Harpy's Feather Duster banned here. It's basically the same concept. So Raigeki is still around here in the TCG, so I see absolutely no reason not to use it. It's going to put in a lot of work next format. Basically, Zoodiacs suck at getting their board wiped, and this is just one card that allows you to do it. And when you consider you can run Raigeki, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, and Dark Hole, you can pretty much have 6 ways to wipe their board, and that's just these 3 cards, and then you can side all the other cards if you really wanted to. I wouldn't put 6 cards in that wipe a board pretty much because that's a little too much for me, but you could definitely side like a Raigeki and 3 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, or you could do Dark Hole if you know you're going second. So there's a lot of options. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber I like a lot because it gives you a free monster on your side of the field, wipes their board before you get a board off, and then you can banish this later on to search a Kaiju and interrupt them even more. So you basically both get Kaijus, but you just give yourself the bigger one and then swing over it. So it stops them from interrupting you, it stops a lot of shit, and it searches Kaijus, which is really, really good. Dark Hole is just, a really good version of Raigeki if you're going second. You just activate it before your field is pretty much set up. You don't normal summon a monster and then Dark Hole it, just Dark Hole and then do all your stuff from there. They can't really stop you. Drancia is not a problem anymore, and it just wipes their board, which is really what Zoodiacs I feel is weakest to. Summon Limit is a personal tech of mine. I enjoy the card. I'm pretty sure the way it works is when the summons happen, even if the summons happen before this card and then you activate it, it still counts those summons. So if they go like Terratop into Top Katamborg, then you activate Summon Limit, that does actually stop them, I believe. At least that's the way the judges at my locals have been ruling it. So this card is really good. If your opponent summons twice, they can't summon anymore. That's it. Doesn't matter if it's normal, doesn't matter if it's flipped, doesn't matter if it's specialed. that's literally it. So summon limit is actually really, really good. It does affect you, but obviously you can just get rid of it on your turn. You can do a lot of things to get rid of it. If you're playing it, you know you're gonna have to out it, but summon limit just stops them. You set up turn 1, go absolutely nuts, and then they normal summon a monster, special another, and then you go summon limit, and then they stop, and then they get no combos off, and they are pretty much screwed from that point. So that's why I really like it. It also does count cards like kaijus, so if they were to special summon a kaiju over one of your monsters, then say they special summon Momorat, you flip summon limit, they don't get anything from there. So I like summon limit. It's a personal tech of mine. I don't think it's actually going to be super relevant next format, but it does put in a lot of work against many decks. This can be used against Infernoids, this can be used against Eidolons. There's a lot of things that it could stop. Next up is Anti-Spell. This is just, once again, a card that's generally good, but because Zoodiacs have cards that are spells that allow them to special summon for free, and because they do use a lot of Tenki and stuff like that, Anti-Spell does shut them down a bit. It stops them from getting all their searches and all their pluses. I like Anti-Spell also because it stops Pendulums, it stops Eidolons because they rely on searching their fusions and stuff like that. So Anti-Spell is just another good card that's going to be generally good next format, but does also affect Zoodiacs. Dimension Barrier, I don't really think I need to explain. This card just stops any kind of card you choose pretty much. So you can call Synchro, Xyz, Fusion, Ritual, Pendulum. So this stops pretty much every, extra deck or Pendulum version of a deck in any kind of format. So it's just really, really good. Even if they Twin Twister, it doesn't matter. If they Twin Twister, ditch something like any Zodiac monster and they give away what deck they're playing, you flip it and call Xyz and chain. So that's really, really good. I mean, obviously, if you're going into like game 2 or game 3, you know what they're playing. Dimension Boundary can come out of the side and be put into your main deck, especially if you're going first and you lost the first round. Just flip it, call Xyz, and then they don't get a turn. And then from there, you just pretty much go off. And lastly is the Solemn Brigade. I've seen Scolding a little bit because some decks don't like to set a lot of cards, and it really does pretty much negate almost anything. But mostly I've been seeing Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike I think is probably one of the best cards you can side. It's a counter trap, so not many things can chain to it, not many things can negate it, and it basically stops anything you can't max C. So if they just, special summon from the extra deck and then you didn't plan on that happening and you didn't know they were going to do that, just flip Strike and get rid of it. So Solemn Strike is a really good card. Stops monsters being specialed and stops monster effects. So even if you're late to the game, don't realize what they did, and then they activate the monster that special summoned effect, just flip Solemn Strike. They go Drancia to pop your monster, go Solemn Strike, negate and destroy, and then they basically don't have anything to do from there. So that's why I like Solemn Strike. Same thing for Solemn Warning. Solemn Warning is again one of those cards that stops pretty much anything, but because Solemn Warning is at 1, I'm not too keen on it. I do like it, but I just don't see it enough. Solemn Strike is a thing you can run at 3 for now, unless it gets hit on the next TCG ban list. But yeah, so Solemn Strike I like, but maybe it'll get hit, maybe it won't. But I really do think this is a great card to run. 3 Solemn Strike, 3 Dimensional Barrier, going first, you're pretty much golden. No matter what you open, if you could set any of those cards, you can pretty much interrupt them until you draw the cards you need. So yeah. And lastly, as an Xyz monster that I think is pretty good in any rank 4 deck because it's just 2 level 4 monsters, it's generic rank 4, is Ragna Zero. This card allows you during either player's turn to destroy a monster whose attack is higher than its original attack, which is pretty much what all the Zoodiac extra deck monsters do, and then from there you get to draw a card if you do destroy it. So you not only go pretty much +1 from using this card's effect, but you also destroy your opponent's monster. Imagine having like Raigeki Break, but you draw 1. That's pretty much what this is. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. And if you did, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up or click subscribe if you really enjoyed it, because it's free, it's fun, and I'll see you guys in the next one.